Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. As you are probably well aware, Series 9 is off and running, and I am more of a tortoise than a hare right now, but there have been a number of grassroots tournaments, and the metagame has seen a ton of development. Since over 7,000 of you have watched my Intro to Series 9 video, I figured I would give you some more updated teams and rental codes that have done well over the last couple of weeks. These include teams from the Victory Road Circuit, the Rose Tower Circuit, Japan Nationals, as well as some other teams that I've seen that have been floating around. And if you think this is something that I should do regularly, let me know. Make sure to give this video a like, subscribe if you haven't, and let's get into it. So the first tournament of Series 9 was hosted about 2 weeks before it officially started, back in Series 8, and it was won by Matty Moo, my NPA captain, actually, for the New Bark Loud Puppies, and he used the team that Willie and Dark Jorsh used to win 2 different Desafio Latam tournaments way back in January. So it turns out that the first tournament of Series 9 was won by a team that was really good towards the end of Series 7. It was the sort of Porygon 2 Glastrier control type team that I had talked about in my last video, and he did say that he had made some slight changes to the team, and I know that he worked with Willie a little bit on building the team, but you can pretty much use this exact same team, and it's still going to be very viable and still very relevant. And of course, the rental code is in this article that will be in the description down below. The second place player was Asura, and they also put their public Pokepaste out. They do not have EVs in this, but it is also the sort of Porygon 2 Glastrier control type of team that I had talked about. It is slightly different, obviously, but it turns out that the first tournament of Series 9 was still kind of dominated by the teams that had done well towards the end of Series 7. The third and fourth place players both use the same team, I believe, and we will talk a little bit more about it later because Julio has been tearing up the circuit right now. He's done well in multiple grassroots tournaments, and so we will see this team very shortly. The next major Series 9 tournament was the Rose Tower Open. I believe this was the second tournament in the Rose Tower circuit. That is one of my favorite circuits to play in. This is the second iteration of it. The first one was back at the beginning of 2020. It's always really well run, and they have another tournament this upcoming weekend. If you are interested, you should definitely go check that out. This tournament was won by Asuya, and they had a really cool team with a Regidrago on it. Now, this weekend, we also had a tournament by Ben Lee, which was a charity tour to stop Asian hate. And this was a much smaller tournament, but it was also dominated by Regidrago, both in the first and second slot. I know that Vichy, Flying Falcon 7, has been using their Moltres Regidrago team to a lot of success in a few different tournaments, but this is, of course, a very different Regidrago team that did very well in Rose Tower, and so I actually really wanted to do a top team testing video on this team, and I tried it out, and it turns out it is very difficult to pilot. The team itself has a lot of firepower, just a lot of really strong Pokemon. The synergy is like questionable. There's definitely some synergy between like Urshifu and Regieleki. The Swords Dance Glastrier with Clefairy has synergy. The Rillaboom is necessary to run Regidrago because you need to turn off Misty Terrain and pressure Tapu Fini, but it's really hard to use. I think there are very precise lines against a lot of teams. You have to lead very correctly to exert all of your pressure against every single team, and if you lead incorrectly, it felt like it was very difficult. That's not to say that it was a lead roulette team. I just think that it is a very precise team, and Asuya, the builder of the team, probably knew how to pilot it better than anyone else, and that's why they did so well with it. Now, it is worth noting that Asuya did get disqualified, and this is the official statement from the Rose Tower staff. Essentially, when you enter a open team sheet tournament, you need to provide the open team sheet, which doesn't have EVs. That's what you just saw on screen, as well as the closed team sheet, which does have EVs that moderator can check in case of any disputes. And there was a dispute after finals, and the moderator team went to check the closed team sheet, and it was just inaccessible, is my understanding of the situation. And therefore, because the player basically didn't submit a team sheet, they got a disqualification. That being said, that shouldn't take away from their really incredible run all the way through this tournament. Just it shows off the power of this team and the power of Regidrago, and so it's definitely worth trying out. If you're interested in trying out any of these other teams, I actually have a link to all of the open team sheets from Top Cut, which of course will be linked in the description down below. And I think going through some of the other teams that did well, we do see that Acosta, who has also been popping off recently, just done really, really well in this the grassroots tournaments over the last few weeks. They used a team with a Dragapult Terrakion core, as well as the Torkoal Venusaur core, and that's something that we've seen a lot with these Torkoal Venusaur teams, is we've seen them being paired with these other really powerful 2 Pokemon core, in this case, Dragapult Terrakion. I think Dragapult Terrakion was a really good response to the metagame at the moment because you saw a lot of Porygon 2 last year, right? And Terrakion does really well into that. A lot of the defensive teams that the metagame has started to, the metagame has started to become very defensive around certain Pokemon, and a lot of those Pokemon were weak to fighting. And on top of that, if your team is reliant on like Grimmsnarl to set up screens and Intimidate to slow down your opponent so that you can position a little better and slow the game down to the point where you are trading damage against these frailer Pokemon really effectively, you can only do that if you survive hits. And you can survive hits from like a +1 Pokemon, from like maybe a Spectrier that gets a +1. You can't survive hits from a +4 Terrakion. That's just not feasible. And so this is a really good piece of counterplay to a lot of the aggressive defensive teams. However, it really struggled, I think, against a lot of hyper offensive teams that did have ways to slow down Terrakion and take the KOs on Dragapult or Terrakion before they really got to set up with their strategy. Sun definitely helps to mitigate some of that, but not all of that. And so the team is really good into what the metagame was at the time, but I think the metagame has shifted a little past the point where Dragapult Terrakion is an incredibly strong core. It's still definitely something that can be utilized to beat these really powerful defensive cores that I'm sure are going to rotate back into the format. And of course, we will go through a lot of these other Porygon 2 last year teams that are pretty common. And so the next team that was really interesting was Zelda's team. Of course, Zelda, very well known for hosting tournaments, also participated and got all the way to top 4. Again, same kind of deal where you have Torkoal Venusaur and then another powerful 2 Pokemon core. And again, Porygon 2 is also just really good on the Torkoal Venusaur. In fact, you might as well call it a 3 Pokemon core there because you lead Porygon 2 Venusaur. And you just have a ton of options from there, be it switch out to Torkoal and attack with Venusaur, Sleep Powder with Venusaur, switch out the Venusaur and click Trick Room to enable your Torkoal. But this team has a secondary, like the other team didn't have great ways to abuse Trick Room. You set up Trick Room with Porygon 2, and then you aren't actually doing that much. This team has a way better way to abuse Trick Room if you set it up, which is Rhyperior. Weakness Policy Rhyperior, of course, was a huge threat at the beginning of 2020. And it's basically doing the same thing now. I assume it's at 1 point faster than the Porygon 2, so that it's slower and Trick Room can get self-ice beamed and then kind of go off with its 3 attacking moves and a +2 attack. It can also, of course, just take an attack if your opponent tries to hit it because that is solid rock. And then it also has the 2 Pokemon core of Tapu Koko Regieleki, which I have seen a little bit more of, especially Tapu Koko, but I don't know if that's necessarily the best Pokemon to put next to Torkoal Venusaur, but you do really have the flexibility to put any sort of powerful 2 Pokemon core, and this is what Sam decided was the best one for them. And then the other team that got all the way to top 4 was Damiano La Barbera's team, and this is also a cool team. I really like these teams in this tournament. This has a Porygon Z, and I was talking to Gavin Michaels, who really likes Porygon Z, and he was saying this is so incredible. This is like the best team. He, I think, used it in NPA for 1 week, and I was not as impressed personally. I think it's a really cool choice, but I really struggle to see why you use Porygon Z over Spectrier, unless you say that Spectrier is clicking Max Strike a lot, because they do have the same coverage moves, right? They have a normal and a ghost move, and then Spectrier also gets to run a ground move, or it could also run Nasty Plot Protect like this Porygon Z is running. You have a lot of the same support Pokemon. You see Clefairy, you see Urshifu, you see Regieleki. You don't see Dragapult, of course, but I guess the justification is that if you're saying that you're going to be clicking Max Strike more than you're clicking Max Phantasm with Spectrier, then Porygon Z might actually be a better choice because just doing more damage with those Max Strikes. But I think that in general, Spectrier kind of fits into the same core and does a little better overall. But that being said, Porygon Z, I did see quite a bit of it on the ladder. It is a very cool team. And those were kind of the main teams that did well, the top 4 teams. There were a lot of other teams that did well. Of course, one team that I do want to point out is the team that Ko and Joe Ugardi used. Very similar teams, 1 Pokemon different. And I did point this out in the last video. This is the team that Ko won the Zelda High Roller Challenge with. And that was maybe the best defensive team of the tournament, but we have started to see offensive teams figure out ways to beat it. One great way to beat it that we start to see that Joan Garcia used is a Grimmsnarl Celesteela team. And that core of Grimmsnarl Celesteela really started to see a ton of usage starting from this tournament and moving forward. And we're going to talk a lot more about that in a little while. And then the other team that I want to talk about is the team that Lele used to get top 8 in this tournament, because I didn't talk about this team in the Series 7 breakdown for Series 9. But this is a team that won the GameStop Italia tournament that was restricted to Italian residents, but had a massive prize payout. I believe most of the Italian VGC players played in it, and Lele ended up winning. Now, this was all the way back in November, so it is a pretty old team. But I know that Lele has been using this, and of course, cut this Rose Tower tournament. I played him in a Victory Road tournament a little later using a very similar team. And it's a very cool team that I believe the rental code still works. You should definitely try it out. Sand is starting to make a comeback because Excadrill actually does pretty well into a lot of things. Celesteela has a niche in this format. It's really good next to Excadrill specifically because clicking Helping Hand Earthquake is crazy, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that too. But definitely worth revisiting this team from all the way back in November that is still making waves in this format right now. And so that kind of wraps up the Rose Tower Open. That was the main tournament of this week. But then the next week, we actually have 3 tournaments to talk about. The first of the 3 tournaments was the Victory Road Circuit Qualifier number 1. Victory Road is also hosting their circuit. Also a great circuit. Also would recommend. And there's going to be a few more of these, including this upcoming weekend as well. And so the Victory Road's first qualifier, I did play in this. I actually lost to the second place team, Orlando Luna. And if this team is familiar to you, it is because it is the stock standard Cole. This is the team that Wolf used to win Players Cup 2. I'm pretty sure it is exactly the same team. So it says a lot that it did really well and managed to get all the way to second place. Orlando played it really well. And of course, this is also really cool because every single team, again, open team sheet tournament, every single team has an open team sheet from Top Cut. So you can check all of that out, and of course that will be linked in the description. The winner was Sanvi, an Italian player, and they used another Porygon 2 Glastrier team. So again, early metagame, we do see a lot of Porygon 2 Glastrier putting in a lot of work. Throughout, like, it's just a very difficult team to break through, a very difficult team to beat, and people have slowly started to figure out how to beat it. But it just got so many defensive options, so many ways to pivot. You got Volt Switch, you've got U-Turn, and you've got bulky Pokemon like Porygon 2 and Tapu Fini, all of which can do damage on their own. Porygon 2 gets download boosts and then does a lot with Tri-Attack. Calm Mind, Fini, Landorus is a great Dynamax target, Regieleki is a great Dynamax target, and then all of that eventually lets you position your Glastrier to do maximal damage, or if you can't position your Glastrier, you can Dynamax basically any one of these Pokemon. So it's a very flexible team, very high skill team. And obviously was kind of what the format was looking like at the end of Series 7. And I wouldn't be surprised if it came back to this, maybe with a little bit more refined version of this sort of team. Going through top 4 further, we do see that Trainer Rob used another Sand team that did really well. It's got some really interesting choices. I think the 2 things that stand out to me are the Dragon Dance on Tyranitar, something I haven't really seen before. It's a little too slow to really make use of it this format. You need to run Jolly just to outspeed something like Spectrier after a Dragon Dance, but with the combination of Tyranitar and Thundurus, you actually do kind of get by a little bit, because after an Airstream, you outspeed something like Urshifu, and so Urshifu can't actually KO you, and then alternatively, you can just click Dragon Dance, and then you get to +2 speed and +1 attack, and then it becomes really scary. So some very cool techs on this team. The other cool tech is Will-O-Wisp on Incineroar, something that has begun to get a little more popular. It's not really just a gimmick. Remember, this was an open team sheet tournament. Everyone saw Will-O-Wisp on their team sheet, and it still did really well. Despite the fact that, there's Tapu Fini to turn on Misty Terrain, there's an Amoonguss that can potentially put things to sleep, which are obviously just very safe switch-ins to Will-O-Wisp. But as far as fourth moves on Incineroar go, you used to see a lot of Taunt, you used to see a lot of Dark moves, but Will-O-Wisp makes a lot of sense, because usually, the way that you want to play against an Incineroar is you want to, once the Incineroar is on the field, you want to switch in your physical attacker, right? But if the Incineroar, and then the Incineroar doesn't actually have a great way to stop it from doing things other than parting shotting, but you have to call the right slot, and ideally you're forcing the Incineroar to click a different button like Fake Out or like Flare Blitz at the threat of being KO'd if it doesn't get to click those moves, right? And so it's either forced to switch out and not click Parting Shot, or click a different attack to get any value on the field. Then you switch your physical attacker in on that turn, and your physical attacker gets a free turn to do whatever it wants. Will-O-Wisp stops it from doing that, because Will-O-Wisp no longer lets you have that free turn. You are just getting burnt, and that is really bad. And so that's a really cool tech that might see some more play in the future. Otherwise, we did see again another Sand team that did really well, so Sand might be picking back up in usage a little bit. The other top four was Sisiet, and this is the next team that we saw that has a Grimmsnarl Celesteela core. And so Sisiet used the Full Intense Grimmsnarl, which of course it was common on the Grimmsnarl Zapdos cores back in Series 7, but used it with a Celesteela instead. Celesteela is, of course, a little slower, but is a lot more powerful with Beast Boost, so it can just stack those boosts. Can benefit a lot more from Full Intense because it is a little bit slower. And then, of course, the Fake Tears can also benefit the Porygon 2 and the Tapu Koko. And the Celesteela has cool synergy with the Landorus. So it's another cool team. We start to see a lot more teams that look like this. I think the real reason that Celesteela is starting to see more usage is because it's really good into Sun. Venusaur does not have great responses to it other than clicking Sleep Powder and the Life Orb Meteor Beam. Once you max, you are not only turning off the Sun, but you are also KOing the Torkoal, excuse me. And so we are seeing a lot more Celesteela, and it makes a lot of sense because it's a really good Pokemon. So Sisiet, of course, gets all the way to top 4 with that. Edu, we're going to see this team a little later. Edu is a very good player and topped multiple tournaments with this team, but we also see the same idea with Grimmsnarl Celesteela here. Ismail used a very cool team that is using a Regirock, and Regirock also is starting to see a lot more usage. I guess we'll talk about that as we see higher placing teams with Regirock, but the other key Pokemon is Marowak. Of course, we also see Safety Goggles Celesteela, which makes it really good into Sun. But Marowak is a Pokemon that started to see a little bit of play in Series 5 and then kind of fell off. It wasn't really... It felt like it didn't have the power to do enough in Series 7, but here we see someone have a lot of success with it. Of course, it gets to click Max Phantasm and Trick Room, and that's just such a powerful move to click because it not only does a lot of damage coming from a Marowak Alola, but also is making your future Max Phantasms more powerful, making your Regirock more powerful, and Regirock also really benefits from the Max Quake boosts that Marowak can provide. And so, all in all, very cool team. I don't know if Marowak is good or if this player just caught on to Regirock and Celesteela being very good a little bit ahead of time. But of course, I'm sure that Marowak put in work as one of the main damage dealers on this team. Going through some more, of course, we do see Acosta and Andrew Ding. They both use the same team. They actually did use slightly different versions of the team, but overall, this is sort of just like the standard Spectrier core where you see Reggie Aleki, Spectrier, Clefairy, and Urshifu, or some sort of redirection, and Urshifu. They're just like kind of the standard, and we do see Rillaboom a lot on those teams as another physical attacker to clean up games or benefit from Max Phantasm drops, and we do see a lot of Glastrier now. And Double Horse it's been called just like the base stat total team because these Pokemon are absurd in terms of their base stat totals. They just do so much damage, and then they have Beast Boost. They're just good Pokemon, and like this is just a team filled with good Pokemon, and good players are piloting it and doing well with it. But they also have a lot of, at least the Spectrier part of the team has a lot of synergy. The Glastrier always, to me, feels a little bit out of place on the team, but, it does patch matchups like Moltres that this team otherwise would struggle with. And so those were the top 8 teams. There are some other cool teams scrolling down through the list. One team that I do want to shout out is the team that Mars VGC used. This is a team that got 6th in the Players' Cup 3 qualifiers way back in Series 7. That it did really well. And I actually made a video about it way back in January with the top team testing. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about this team, definitely go check that video out. I know that Kai Livinghouse also topped the ladder with it back at the end of Series 7. We do see Asuya do well again. We see Lenny. This is a team that I want to talk about because my boy Kunal has been talking up this team nonstop. I know he caught a smaller grassroots tournament as well using the same team. And again, he caught on to a lot of the Pokemon that we're going to talk about with the Grimmsnarl Celesteela. It's just this incredibly powerful core. Garchomp has been seeing a lot more usage. And so this is a really strong way of using those Pokemon. And of course, Amoonguss is something that has started to drop off in usage. We thought it was going to be a really good Pokemon. Haven't seen it as much, but paired with both Garchomp and Rotom, it really enables you to set up. And so this is a cool team as well that I wanted to give a shout out to. And then, of course, some other really good players like Niku Alex and Gabriel Agati also cut this tournament. So a lot of really good players here and a lot of really cool teams that we can learn from. The second of 3 tournaments held that weekend was the X9 Championships held by Joeux9. And this was a slightly smaller tournament. I think it had like 70 entries as compared to the 130 for Victory Road, but also the players who competed were all very good. And as you can see from this top cut, there's a lot of really, really talented players. The winner was Holding Light, who used another Spectrier team. Again, very similar type of team. They did actually post a rental code of the team if you want to try it out, and there's also a paste in that same tweet. And so the team, of course, Regieleki, Urshifu, Spectrier, just a really common core. We don't see the redirection in this case, but we do see the Glastrier, and of course, Porygon 2 and Incineroar to round it out. Porygon 2 means that the Glastrier mode is just a little more powerful this time. It doesn't feel as out of place because it's very easy to set up Trick Room, and now all of a sudden the Glastrier is doing a lot more. However, you can very easily bite yourself in the back by setting up Trick Room and not really having a great way to have a secondary Pokemon that can benefit from it. You just have to have Porygon 2 and Glastrier on the field during that time period. It also has Urshifu with Choice Band. So a lot of the Urshifu that we saw in Spectre teams were Rapid Strike, and this one is Urshifu Dark with Choice Band. And that's just a choice. I don't really know if that's better or worse. I think Urshifu Rapid Strike is really, really good right now, and we've seen it on a lot of Spectre teams specifically. But the one thing that you can't do in team preview is know which one it is, right? And so that's potentially a benefit of using Urshifu Dark. And then on top of that, you do get to hit the things like Metagross that Glastrier might struggle with if Spectre isn't enough to deal with those sort of things. And so that is definitely a decent reason to run it. Also, Sun is another decent reason to run it, right? Because you don't want your your main attacking move to get weakened. And so Wicked Blow does a little bit more into Sun teams. So that's the team that won the tournament. The team that got second place was by Fede Campo, and they did not release a rental. However, they build a lot with Marco Fiero, who is also using Blacephalon Colossal for a lot of this format, and I actually played Marco Fiero in one of the Victory Road tournaments, and so I have his open team sheet. I know he streams with the team quite a bit as well. And so Blacephalon Cole, something that was somewhat popular, at least had some fringe popularity at the very beginning of Series 7. Actually, I think Colding Light cut the first Victory Road Crown Tundra tournament with a Blacephalon team that didn't have a Colossal on it, funnily enough. But the Blacephalon Cole team, of course, uses Mind Blown from Blacephalon, Scarf Blacephalon, to proc the Steam Engine on Colossal. It doesn't give it the Weakness Policy boost, so it's not actually doing that much damage, but ideally, the Mind Blown is doing enough damage to your opponents that the Max Volcalith or Max Flare will KO them. And then, of course, if you do set up Max Flare, your Scarf Blacephalon is doing even more damage with Mind Blown the next turn. And that's kind of like the basic combo. Of course, you still have the Urshifu to set up Colossal, so you got to respect Colossal. And then on top of that, the Blacephalon just kind of does well as a cleanup Pokemon on the Standardous Thunderous mode. Where you have Thunderous Urshifu is still really scary. The Rillaboom is still a great cleanup Pokemon, and now you have this really powerful Firewater Grass Core where every single Pokemon is really strong as a lead or in the back. Very difficult to deal with. It is kind of funny. They have 3 fire types on this team, but this is, of course, slightly different from the team that Fede Campo used that does have like Moltres and Clefairy, but I did want to point it out because it is a different version of the Blacephalon Colossal team. And then the other 2 people in top 4, we see Davide Carrere, who of course got second in Players Cup 2 back in Series 7 using a very different team that also has a Grimmsnarl Celesteela, and I believe that he said on Twitter that he used the same team as Sisiat did to get top 4 in Victory Road this weekend, so we already looked over that paste a little bit. And then the other top 4 user used a Blastoise team, and that actually was revealed publicly with a rental code. And so if you're interested in using Blastoise, we have a little more updated version of the team that Bingji originally used way back in December. And like, I don't know, like it's not doing the same Blastoise things. It's confusing because like it feels like you want to max the Blastoise because otherwise you're clicking Hydro Cannon, but that's really the only move that you want to click while it's maxed. Yawn and Icy Wind are really useful as like support moves, but then you don't really have a ton of Pokemon to support. It's basically just Urshifu and Thundurus, but it certainly gives you options. The rest of the core, of course, just is like Thundurus, Urshifu, Rillaboom. We saw that on some other teams that did very well. Incineroar is a fantastic glue Pokemon, and we do have this strong Firewater Grass core as well. And then Grimmsnarl gets to support the team with Light Clay and the screens, as well as Thunder Wave to make things a little slower so that Urshifu and Thundurus and Blastoise can kind of do a little more damage when it needs to. But, this is also just another example of how powerful screens are when you have Gmax Volcalith or Gmax Vinelash, or in this case, Gmax Cannonade to kind of chip down your opponent's team. And yeah, so those are the teams that did well in the Joeux9 Championship. Again, a little bit of a smaller tournament, but like all of these players are so well known. You know, again, you see Julio. This was the other team that did well in the Zelda Tour that we were talking about. And so, of course, we do see that he used this team, and I think he used the same team a little later as well. But this is just another very powerful core with Metagross, Rotom, Moltres, Entei. Entei using Bulldoze to proc the Metagross's weakness policy, and then Grimmsnarl to set up screens and really allow these Pokemon to live forever. We see Dylan Salvanera, another regional champion, who also discovered that Regirock was really good right around the same time. And then Mario, of course, also using the Dusclops Glastrier team that is a little outdated in my opinion, but still very competent because of how many defensive options it has. So also another example of a bunch of great players kind of rediscovering the same techs at the same time and showing how the format has developed. So the third tournament to happen on that weekend was the Rose Tower Clash. This is a free tournament hosted by Rose Tower. It doesn't give you any prize money, unlike the other two tournaments. However, it does give you points towards the Rose Tower circuit. And because it was free, it actually had the biggest attendance out of all these tournaments. It had over 200 players participating. And it was won by this team that was absolutely nuts. It had Nihilego, Urshifu, Thundurus. It was nuts. And so it was actually a pretty standard nut team. It was a little different from the other versions because it had a Dusclops Glastrier, which we hadn't really seen in a little bit. Now, the Dusclops Glastrier does give it a secondary mode, but I still think that it's just a worse hyper offensive core than the Spectrier stuff that we've been seeing do really well. I think the Spectrier is generally going to beat this core 1v1. Now, granted, the Urshifu is going to be a little problematic for Spectrier directly, but Regieleki is really good, and Dusclops can't really do much in front of a Spectrier. That being said, it did win this big tournament, and so it's definitely still a very viable archetype. And Dylan has found a way to innovate it, and they also did publish their rental code. So if you want to try out the latest version of the Nut Core, make sure to check that out. There were a few other teams that obviously did really well. The second place team was also a standard bulky good stuffs core that actually didn't have a Porygon 2 or a Glastrier on it. We see it has a Grimmsnarl and Rotom, Kartana, Regieleki, Landorus, and Tapu Fini on the team. Also, again, just kind of good defensive good stuff that allows you to outplay your opponents is really valuable when you feel like you're the better player. And if you're an offensive player, you need to figure out ways to beat those specific things. But the team that Marcel or Macron, I'm not actually sure how to pronounce that. The team that they used did not have all of the same defensive tools that a lot of the other defensive teams did, and so maybe those very specific tools that offensive teams were using were not able to beat this specific composition until finals, where it lost to a relatively old offensive team, funnily enough. And then we also saw, Vincenzo get all the way to top 4 with the Grimmsnarl Celesteela core that we've been talking about extensively. We see Alex Collins got to top 4 with the Spectrier Regieleki Urshifu core. This one has a Togekiss on it rather than a Clefairy, which I kind of like because it also has a Landorus. And I think Landorus and Togekiss have really cool synergy together. And Togekiss is a very reasonable redirector for these type of teams. So those were the top 4 teams. I did see one other rental code from top 16, which was Tanner's rental code, and they used a rain team that didn't actually have a rain setter. It had Rain Dance Tornadus to set up Kingdra, but really Kingdra's just setting up itself with Max Geysers. So that's a pretty cool take on it. And of course, it does have the Entei that Juan Nar used, along with a Metagross instead of a Celesteela as the steel type of choice with weakness policy to benefit from Entei's existence. So pretty cool take on the team. I didn't see any other rental codes from top 16, but I might have missed one or two. But of course, so if you do know every rental code from top 16 of this tournament or any of these tournaments that I didn't pick up on, make sure to let me know, post it in the comments down below. But this was the third and final tournament of that weekend. And then this past weekend that just happened, we had 2 more really big tournaments that happened that I wanted to cover. The first big tournament that happened this past weekend was the Victory Road Qualifier number 2. If you are interested in playing Victory Road Qualifier number 3, it is happening this upcoming weekend, so make sure to check that out. There are 5 total, so you have 5 chances to qualify for their circuit finale. The team that won the tournament was another Sun team made by Jackson Finch, and then Kyle Geffner North ended up winning the tournament with it. And it uses a lot of the things that we've seen recently. Of course, the Venusaur Porygon 2 Torkoal core is just kind of standard. We talked about how broken Grimmsnarl is when you set up screens with your Vine Lash type effects. And then also, it's got a really smart way of dealing with most people's Sun response. So we did see a lot of Celesteela, and people were saying, I'm just going to use my Celesteela to beat all these Sun teams because it can KO the Venusaur and it can KO the Torkoal. And Grimmsnarl really supports it in doing that. But when you have a Zapdos on the Sun team, suddenly the Celesteela is a lot worse because it doesn't actually beat Zapdos 1v1, especially when paired with Grimmsnarl that can set up a light screen and set up fake tiers to make sure that Zapdos KOs a max Celesteela with Thunderbolt. And so I think that's a really cool tech choice to figure out a way to beat the thing that the metagame is using to respond to your team. I really like that innovation. And then the other thing that they did was they put a Regirock on the team. And so we did see earlier Zelda used a Rhyperior with weakness policy on his Sun team, but Regirock is, I think, just a better Pokemon. It does have a lower attack stat, but it is so much bulkier even without Solid Rock. It has Clear Body, so it can't get intimidated. It can't get stat dropped in any way. And it has Curse to boost up its attack along with the weakness policy, so your opponent can't just ignore it and not proc the policy. And so Regirock, of course, has been rising in usage for a lot of different reasons, but it's a really cool choice on this team specifically. Being able to serve as a secondary thing to benefit from Trick Room next to Torkoal. And Torkoal also could theoretically proc its weakness policy with Earth Power. I don't imagine that actually happened very often. But it's I think this is a really cool team. Hopefully we are getting a team report for the team soon, but no promises on that one. The second place team is also a team that I think is so cool. It's Edu's team. Of course, Edu got, I think, top 4 in the previous Victory Road qualifier with this team. Again, this team is just sick. I think that Colossal Urshifu can be teched onto teams without going full on Colossal, provided you have the ways to end game effectively, because you get Volcalith up so consistently, or your opponent is forced to commit their anti-Urshifu lead all the time. Otherwise, they're just going to lose to the Urshifu Colossal. And it turns out that every single redirection Pokemon in the metagame, be it Togekiss, Amoonguss, Clefairy, not so much Indeedee, but mainly those three, all lose to Celesteela. And so it lets you really safely lead Celesteela into a lot of teams. And of course, Grimmsnarl Celesteela is crazy right now. It is, again, if you don't have a response to Grimmsnarl Celesteela on whatever team you are building right now, you are throwing. There is no reason not to. It is just the flavor of the week right now. Make sure you understand how you're going to play against that lead. But Edu's team specifically kind of forces that lead to have good matchups if you want to respect Colossal. And even if it's not a great matchup, it still is just a powerful enough combination of Pokemon with Lagging Tail and with both Pokemon being relatively bulky to be able to pivot into a better situation for it. So I really like that. I think that the team, the Colossal, like the thing that Colossal otherwise struggles with is like Porygon 2, and this team has 2 different taunt users, and Grimmsnarl also has Trick, which takes away its Eviolite and makes Porygon 2 a lot easier to deal with. So surprisingly, this Celesteela Grimmsnarl core has really good responses to the things that Colossal is normally weak to. And then the last thing is that I think Grimmsnarl Colossal is a really sick lead. Like, surprisingly good, because a lot of times your opponent wants to commit their Dynamax to beating Colossal, right? They want to max their Garchomp or max their Landorus. Those are good Pokemon to Dynamax normally, and if you max it into a Colossal, you're feeling really good about yourself. Now, what the Colossal can do now is just protect, and if you max Quake into a Protect, they are getting the weakness policy, and if they trick the Lagging Tail onto you, now you are no longer moving before the Colossal, right? And so now they have a Colossal that is a +2 special attack, and a Grimmsnarl with fake tiers that can basically make sure that your Colossal KOs anything, gets up Volcalith, and your Dynamax Pokemon is no longer moving fast and taking a bunch of damage every turn. I think that's, I don't know how often that actually comes up, but that was a lead combination that came up in my head when I was theorying this team and trying to figure out the lines for this team, and I think it's just really cool. So props to Edu, very, very cool team. I know my friend NJ has been talking about this team as well and saying it's been sick, so definitely want to try that out at some point. The team that got top 4 is Taran's team with the Regieleki Gothitelle as the primary lead. Now, you may recognize the team from somewhere else, and it's because it was featured on a Road Tour ranked, except there was a Vanillix on the team instead of the Togekiss. And so Willie built this team, got to number 1 on the ladder, and I actually saw Aaron Zhang's video on it pretty recently, and I think this is really cool. Of course, this has a public code. Tyron's version of the team with Togekiss does not have a public rental code, so I guess this is the best thing you're going to get. But it really takes advantage of Gothitelle, which is, Shadow Tog's such a crazy ability, and giving Gothitelle Fake Out was such a huge buff to the Pokemon, and then Fake Out got nerfed, with Dynamax. And so Gothitelle was always going to find a way to be really good. Regieleki is really cool because it's very easy to pivot out, although Willie's team does not have Volt Switch, and Tyrant's doesn't either, okay. But Regieleki you can click Helping Hand, Max Strike, or Helping Hand, Max Electric if your opponent leads incorrectly into it, or you can just click Hypnosis. And Hypnosis is crazy because if you lead correctly, you have trapped your opponent and they can't reposition, and you have used your really powerful offensive Pokemon to beat your opponent because, they aren't allowed to do one of the most fundamental mechanics of Pokemon, which is switching. And if you lead incorrectly, you still just have a 60% chance of winning the game with Hypnosis. It's crazy. I love this team so much. Again, so many cool innovations in this metagame. So shout out to Tyron and Willie for figuring this out. And then the other top 4 team was Lilbo Peep, Kevin, who ended up winning the Victory Road Circuit back in Series 8 with a team that looked very similar to this. Again, Grimmsnarl, Torkoal, Venusaur, Charizard. I think that he used all 4 of those Pokemon on his team with Ization. And this is basically like the next iteration of that, where, again, Vinelash with screens is broken. That's really all I have to say about that. We see a lot of other similar teams. This team that went 7-0 in Swiss by this Korean player, Lee, it is basically the week 1 Metagross team. It is like actually the team that Chemo used to get top 6 in North America and Players Cup 2 weeks into the format. And so it's crazy that it's still doing well right now. We see more standard Colossal, relatively standard Sun. Yuki is actually the only Porygon 2 Glastrier in this entire top cut, which I thought was crazy. And this is the team that he used way back in the Zelda High Roller Challenge in Series 7. And again, like, this team has so many options to let you outplay your opponent. And Yuki's a fantastic player, so it's not surprising to me that he got top 8 with it. But it really is falling out of favor because people have all of these different techs like Celesteela and like Regirock and the whole shebang to find ways to beat this specific combination of Pokemon. And then going through the rest of the teams, again, I did talk a lot about the double horse Alaki Urshifu core, but we do have Kaoru, who did not put a rental code up, but did put a paste of his team up that got top 16. And so if you want to try this team out, here is another importable version of the team. And then the other team that people are going to be talking about, that again I just saw on Aaron Zeng's channel, is the team that Evan Smoked used to get top 32 with Taurus. That's right, Taurus got to top 32 of this tournament, and it is used to proc Colossal's weakness policy with Surf. I think that's pretty cool. Again, Gothitelle, crazy Pokemon, probably a little underutilized, and so another way has been found to utilize it. It also uses Celesteela, which is of course the flavor of the week right now. Really powerful Firewater Grass core with Taurus. I think that Taurus is interesting because Dragon Bolt is probably the better Surf user, right? Like, it's just a better Pokemon objectively, but it does do one thing poorly, and that is that it doesn't really exert any pressure if you are forced to switch out the Colossal. That is normally fine, because when you're forced to switch out the Colossal, your opponent is often forced to commit their Dynamax, and then the Will-O-Wisp or the Breaking Swipe or the Light Screen is going to put in a lot of work because your opponent's Dynamax isn't going to get a lot of value. But if your opponent doesn't have the Dynamax to deal with Colossal, but you're forced to switch the Colossal out, then Garchomp is often, the Garchomp is a specific example of where that might happen, but then the Dragapult is often in a really bad position because it's not doing much. It's a support Dragapult. And so Taurus, on the other hand, responds to that pretty well because, sure, it doesn't actually get to do a ton of damage, but Icy Wind is still 4x super effective and lowers its speed, makes it a lot worse of a Pokemon. And Intimidate makes it a lot worse of a Pokemon. And it still gets those really powerful max strikes if you do need to max it. But I think that's like a pretty interesting response to some of the Colossal counterplay that we've been seeing. And so, maybe it is the wave. I think that it's still probably worse than the other types of Colossal teams that we've seen cut, 30 different times. But it is a very cool innovation and a very interesting take on Colossal as an archetype. And so, yeah, again, there's another Colossal team right there at number 23. So those are the teams that cut the Victory Road tournament. And then the other tournament that happened is the Japan Nationals. So if you're unfamiliar with the format of Japan Nationals this year, it is a pretty unorthodox format. They actually have their qualifiers at the same time as we did for Players Cup 4. and the top 100 players from that tournament, that online competition, moved on to the next stage, which happened this past weekend. The 100 players played in another online ladder tournament, and the top 20 are going to receive invites to the in-person Japan Nationals that they are hosting in a couple weeks. And so that means that we have started to see teams from that top 100. I'm actually going to dump a bunch of the teams that I found in the description down below. However, most of the people in the top 20, as you can see here with all these question marks, decided that they didn't want to upload their teams because, they want to conserve information for the main event. So the teams between 21 and 100 are more or less revealed, and a lot of them have rental codes available if you want to try out those teams. Just because they didn't qualify didn't mean they're not good. It's just some of the top Japanese players doing their best to play in the biggest tournament of the year. But again, you see some weird teams here, but there are some tweets down here and some rental codes. This is one team that is really strange. You see a Tapu Bulu and you see a Glastrier, and this tweet doesn't have the rental code, but this one does down here. And it is, I can't read Japanese, but I've been told that it is Iron Defense Body Press Glastrier. It is Snarl Dazzling Gleam Hornleech Tapu Bulu, and it is Ally Switch Icy Wind Dusclops. Yeah. This team is absolutely wild. It is so crazy. It's if you want to try it out, of course the rental code is on screen. I don't know what to say. This is just so out there. Keep in mind again, this tournament was a best of one tournament. It probably caught some people off guard. In fact, it probably caught everyone off guard. Who expects leftovers on Glastrier, but it's definitely interesting, it's definitely worth trying out at the very least. And so this did get third place overall at Japan the online portion of Japan Nationals. We do see the fourth place team over here. And so this is the rental code again on screen. This team is a little more standard. It is a very standard Registeel team. Iron Defense Body Press there. Benefits from the Landorus, Clicking Max Quake. And just generally good Pokemon. Lagging Tail Grimmsnarl again makes an appearance. It may be even better on the ladder because people don't necessarily expect it, but it's just a good team. This Spectrier is a wide lens because it really doesn't want to miss Will-O-Wisp, I guess. That's the only explanation I can get. But this team did really well, and of course there is a rental code for it. And I will link this website as well if you want to scroll through here and see all the other teams and all the other tweets, even if they don't have rental codes. Or if you want to really stalk their Twitters and see if they posted a YouTube link or something. So here's another team, again, pretty standard Moltres stuff. This person just, wanted to post a Mario, I guess. So this is an interesting team that got ninth. It used Mamoswine, and it also has a Torkoal and no Sun mode other than Torkoal. Mamoswine is Japan's favorite Pokemon for some reason. Hirofumi used it to a lot of success at the end of Series 7. It's basically seen no success in the West in grassroots tournaments. Whenever I tried it, it was really underwhelming to me. But, it does seem to be working for them. It does have Ice Shard, which does a lot of very potent offensive Pokemon once their Dynamax is over, and it's a pretty reasonable max Pokemon itself. The lone Torkoal is very interesting. It's got 2 of the 3 Pokemon of the Nut Core, but not the one that you want to Dynamax, right? It's got Urshifu and Nihilego. But Torkoal is a pretty cool response to max Airstream users specifically, and that means that Pokemon like Mamoswine, like Urshifu, like Nihilego are often not outsped because they aren't having to take a max Airstream. So maybe that's how the team works. Not entirely sure, and we don't have a rental code, so I can't really see the sets. So this is a team that is totally out there, got 15th place, and we do actually have, this is a team report, this YouTube video, and so we do have a paste of the team. I don't think we have a rental code of the team, but this is a transcribed by Raisin Tio, who does speak Japanese, thankfully, and it's out there. It's pretty wild, you see Entei Metagross, and you think weakness policy Metagross bulldoze Entei, and it's just not. The Kangaskhan, I thought my first reaction was this is so cool, because in my head Kangaskhan has base 100 speed because Mega Kangaskhan does, but it does not. It has base 80 speed, and so it has a Flame Orb and Facade, so it doesn't really care about taking the burn because it's doing more damage with the burn, but it also gets to fling the Flame Orb at another physical attacker. This would be really cool if it outsped Urshifu, but it doesn't, and so I think it's kind of bad. But it's very cool that this person did so well with the team. Very unusual choices, but I do think it is maybe a little bit gimmicky. At least the Kangaskhan set is pretty gimmicky. Also, the Snorlax is actually genuinely good. Yawn Snorlax is a real Pokemon. It is great because it gets to click Steel Roller and turn off the Misty Terrain. So it gets to click Yawn, and you're like, oh, I'm safe. And then it turns out that you're just not. So that's a very cool interaction and you can yawn in Misty Terrain. You cannot yawn in Electric Terrain. They will fail in Electric Terrain, but you can yawn in Misty Terrain and the Pokemon will still be drowsy. So that's a really cool interaction that this person took advantage of, potentially. And of course, if you want to watch their entire team report, is in Japanese, but it is linked in this article. And so those were the teams that I believe we know. But I'm sure we will get more of the top 20 teams soon. But Japan now, and again, the 21 through 100, they haven't compiled them, but I have a bunch of the tweets that have rental codes, and so those will be all in the description. I don't really want to go over all of them. And yeah, so there also is another team that I thought was really cool that didn't do well in any of these tournaments, but did have some success. And that is by my good friend Ryan Lassetto, who used this team with Swampert, Galarian Zapdos, and Dracozolt to a lot of success. And he played in the Rise of Galar circuit hosted by Francesco Pardini. And they're hosting like 4 tournaments a week. It's pretty crazy. I think there's usually one big one every weekend. So I guess check that out as well. But he really popped off this weekend with this team. I think he caught like 3 of the tournaments and got a lot of really unorthodox choices. I really like Swampert personally. And I think Swampert's a really cool Pokemon. I don't necessarily agree with his set, but there's just like a lot of cool choices, and it worked out really well for him. And of course, Celesteela, just the flavor of the week. He said in his team report that Celesteela was the best Pokemon on the team. So make sure to check that team report out and give it a like. The link will be in the description down below. You want to check that out. And yeah, that's all I got. Those are the teams from the last basically month of Series 9 play with any number of rental codes. I hope you really enjoyed this video. If you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe. Comment down below with your favorite team, or if there's any other teams that I might have missed that you want to share. And until next time, I'll see you all later.